And, of course, the voice of the Flyers announcer at the time back in 1974, Gene Hart there, as the Flyers win their first of 2 Stanley Cups in a row. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight on this section of Sports Talk. Hi, everybody. Doug Miles along with Don Henderson. And, Don, we're going to talk some vintage Flyers hockey tonight. I know you were part of that, and our guest is part of that, so I'll let you do the introduction.
Exactly right. Sam Carchidi, kind enough to join us. His book just came out a little bit ago on 50 years with the Philadelphia Flyers, and they were really 50 tumultuous years, Sam. Way up in the middle, way down, and right down. They're third from the bottom, but yet they're only, 3 points from third place.
Yeah, Don. They're a much better team this year, though. It's not that they're third from the bottom because they're playing poorly. They're third from the bottom because the league is so strong. That their division, I should say, the Metro, is the toughest division in all of hockey. And, going into tonight's action, they're actually in the top wild card spot. And as you know, anything can happen once you get in the playoffs. So, they're making a good run. And the surprising thing is they're playing really well right now, 6-1-1 their last 8 games without Claude Giroux producing. And Shane Gostisbehere's been out. He had knee surgery. But a lot of these younger guys, especially Joel Farabee, have really come through. And they're going to be a team to reckon with down the stretch because Carter Hart's coming back maybe this week. And, Gostisbehere's coming back on Thursday. And they're getting good production from everybody up and down the lineup except for Claude Giroux. And his production, for him it's poor. But for somebody else, it's just average. He's got 13 goals right now. But, they're a fun team right now. They have a good blend of youth and veterans, and they're definitely headed in the right direction.
That's very much exactly what the teams that win do have is a blend in there, as you indicated. And, of course, we being down in Sarasota, Doug and I, we get a chance to see the Lightning play quite a bit, and that's really the story. The Lightning had such a tremendous year last year, and then just threw a blank in the playoffs. But pretty much the Flyers are a team, as we go back over the 50 years, that really started from nothing and built from there for Ed Snyder.
Yeah, Ed is the architect, as you well know, and we really miss him. He was a guy who wore his heart on his sleeve, and you can argue with some of the moves he made. Sometimes people say he got too involved, but he always had the Flyers as his best interest and in his best interest because he wanted to get back and win his third Stanley Cup. And it's been 44, 45 long years now. The calendar just changing, and they've come close several times. They've lost 6 straight times in the final since winning it in 1975. And as you said, Ed was the main guy. I mean, he was the guy that brought them here, and he was a guy who did everything in his power to make the Flyers Cup champions. Now, since they went to the salary cap, it made things a lot more difficult for him because he was not adverse to spending. Sometimes he didn't spend the right way, but as I said, he always had the Flyers at heart, and he was always accessible too. The new guys that are in there now are not very accessible as he was, and I always appreciate that. He says, "Hey, you're a fraud if you only talk during good times." So, good or bad, he was always there. And, I appreciate that. It's more corporate now, and the ownership, they want to see questions first before they answer questions. And it's just a different feel to it. Ed rolled up his sleeves and really got involved with the team. And from a media standpoint, you had to really, really like that and like dealing with him. He was a one-of-a-kind guy, no question.
Well, Doug's going through some very hard times. The Rangers, the Islanders came back a little bit last year. They did a little rebuilding job, which was quite good. But the Devils, the Rangers that he followed for so many years, Doug, jump in here because you saw them lose a lot of games.
I was going to say that the first hockey game I ever saw, Sam, was the Rangers against the Flyers. It was January of 1970, a 3-3 tie. I sat in the last row, or next to last row, in the old blue seats in the Madison Square Garden. So the Flyers Rangers were my team, but I saw the Flyers first as well, and of course following them against the Rangers and again against the Islanders later on in the Stanley Cup years. But always a great team to watch. I rooted against them, but there were some tough guys playing back then.
Yeah, the funny thing is, my first game I ever watched was a Flyers-Rangers game as well. It was a couple of years earlier. It was the first season of the Flyers was 67. It was Christmas night, 1967. And, I was a young kid, and I'll never forget the book. They used to have a book called Goal, and Rod Gilbert was on the cover.
Oh, sure.
And I said, who is this guy, Rod Gilbert? I didn't even know how to pronounce his name. And, But, that was some experience. First time I ever saw a hockey game live in person. And, I was hooked because it's a much different game, as both of you know. It's 100% better in person than it is on TV. It doesn't translate quite the same way. It's still a fun sport to watch on TV, but it's 100% better in person because you can watch players away from the play. You just get that feel. I think more than anything else, to me, football, baseball are fine. Basketball too, to a certain extent. Watching on TV, hockey you have to watch in person to really appreciate the game.
Anyway, I think maybe we could go back for just a second. You talked about the spending of the Flyers and Ed Snyder and what he tried to do in building the club, but maybe you'd also go back and talk about Bobby Clark and coming into the Philadelphia Flyers organization, and they really didn't even have enough money at that time to bring him in from Canada to show him where he was coming in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and of course they didn't take him to the second round because everybody was very leery of taking him because of his diabetic condition and how wrong were they? And he was the heart and soul to me. He's the greatest captain in not only Flyers history, but maybe the greatest captain in NHL history. He talk about wearing your heart on his sleeve. He would do everything in his power. Some of it legal, some of it not so legal. He would wield that stick. I can remember when he first came in from the Flin Flon Bombers, and started out kind of slow, and everybody was worried that he couldn't withstand. And he, I guess, it was a 77-game season, I believe then. But he got stronger and stronger and stronger each year, and turned into from a 40-point guy to a 60-point guy to a 100-point guy or 90-point guy, and he was a straw that stirs the drink, as Reggie Jackson would say, and the Flyers stood up for him because they knew he was their meal ticket. And if you went after Bobby Clark, it was sacrilegious. They went after you. The club talking about the Kellys and the Schultzes and the DuPonts, and because of that, he had a little more freedom and a little more room on the ice, and it really helped him and helped the team. But sometimes you think to people outside the Philadelphia area, they know them as the Broad Street Bullies, and they talk about how they just push people around, and that was their identity. Yes, but they were much more than that. They had some great players. Rick McLeish, to me, was a borderline Hall of Famer. Clark was a Hall of Famer. Bill Barber was a Hall of Famer. Of course, Bernie Grant was a Hall of Famer. And they had an underrated defense with Ashby and the Watson brothers. I could go on and on, Ed Van Imp. And I don't think those teams, the 74, 75 teams, get as much credit as they deserve. They were more than just a physical team that pushed you around. They were a very, very good team. They had a dynamic power play. Tom Bladen was terrific at the point, and their penalty kill was one of the best in the league. They could afford to take penalties because they knew with their penalty killing and Clark and Barber and Terry Chris, they would kill penalties. I mean, it was no hardship for them to kill penalties, and the special teams were great. And I sometimes don't think that team gets all the credit it deserves, both those teams in 74 and 75.
Well, I think most people won't realize that, Ed Snyder did not have a lot of money when he started. And he came in and took over the club and really started to build it. But we have to give the Pete Ballantyne Beer Company, because the distributor there was the one that came in with a little money to get Bobby Clark in the beginning. Well, I shouldn't say a little money. He came in with quite a bit of money to get the team on an even keel financially.
Yeah, and then, of course, the first couple of years they had more financial hardships because the roof blew off, and they had to play a lot of games. Correct me, Doug, if I'm wrong, I think they played a couple of Madison Square Gardens, some at the old Toronto Gardens, Maple Leaf Gardens, and I think they played 6 or 7 games on the road until the roof was fixed. And yet their first year, they still, despite playing so many road games, they still won the Western Conference, which of course back then was composed of just the expansion teams. And then they lost in the first round to St. Louis, and they got pushed around by St. Louis. Ed Snyder said this is never going to happen again. And the Barkley brothers and Noel Picard and some other players in the Blues just physically manhandled the Flyers. And
a crazy goal to end the game with if I remember correctly, a shot for the blue line that wound up losing the game for them.
Well, actually, the Flyers in Game 6, I remember. Game 6 was in St. Louis. Flyers are down by a goal. They pull goalie, and Andre Lacroix scores in overtime. He scores with like 15 seconds to go in the game to tie it and to send it into overtime. And then Don Blackburn of the Flyers actually scored from the blue line in the second overtime. He went in for a line change, went over the boards, flipped it down the ice, and it hit somebody's stick and went past Glenn Hall, who, of course, is a Hall of Fame goalie. And the Flyers win Game 6 and force a Game 7 at the Spectrum. And now it's 3-3, and you figure the Flyers have all the momentum in the world coming back home, a miracle win. And they ended up losing in the Spectrum 3-1, including an empty net goal. But, that really started the Flyers on their way because they drafted, right after that, they drafted Kelly, they drafted Zaleski, they drafted Schultz, they traded for Dupont, and, they changed the image of the team. As Snyder said, we're not going to push around anymore, and the rest is history.
Doug?
Talk with Sam Carchidi of the Philadelphia Inquirer. The name of the book is The Big 50, Philadelphia Flyers, the men and moments that made the Philadelphia Flyers. You mentioned, of course, Bernie Parent, and I remember for those 2 years, and of course they won the Cup, and even a couple of years after until he got the eye injury. I've never seen a better goalie. I've seen a lot of the great ones. I think Eddie Giacomin growing up in New York, and you talk about Billy Smith with the Islanders, and Jerry Cheevers and Tony Esposito. But, boy, for that 2-year period, never anybody better, I think, than Bernie, right?
Yeah, you remember the bumper stickers, only the Lord saved more than Bernie Parent.
That's right.
And he is an amazing guy. I just actually talked to him last week for a story I was doing on Carter Hart, the Flyers young goalie.
You must have gotten him on his fishing boat because he goes, he and the chief keep going out on that boat. You hardly get him.
Yeah, in fact, he invited me on his boat, and I said, Bernie, every time you say that, I tell you I get seasick. I go fishing with you from the dock. I can't really get on boats, but he had back surgery about 6 months ago, went through a tough time, and he's doing well now. He was in a car accident, unfortunately, but he's doing very well now, and his wife was also in the accident. She also had back surgery, so they're both bending, and they say they both set off the alarms at airports because they have a lot of metal rods in their back now, but they're both doing well. But Bernie, getting back to his playing days, there was nobody better, and he is still around the Flyers. You see him at games, and still full of energy and vitality, and a lot of people call it Bobby Clark's team. I think Bobby Clark, rightfully so, is the face of the team. But I think if you had to take one player away from the Flyers, if you took Bobby Clark away from the Flyers, I think they still might win the Cup. If you take Bernie Parent away, There's no way you
Yeah,
win
no
the
way.
cup because,
No way.
Yeah. He was the main force, and that's not to take away from Clark because he was spectacular. But Bernie just had that special knack coming up big and making incredible save after save. And I should also mention the book is not just about the past guys. We have a chapter on Carter Hart, their new Bernie Perrant, they hope, and some of the new guys like Ivan Provorov and Travis Konechny and some of the young stars on this year's team. And it's not only about players; it's about different events. And some of it is some of the chapters are just fun things. Like one of them is on the Flyers in pop culture, and I talked to Ike Richmond, who was the guy behind the scenes, and he's the guy that arranges for the Flyers' now iconic jersey or their logo to be in TV shows. If you ever watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
All right.
or
Right.
the Goldbergs, or on and on. You'll always see a Flyers T-shirt that they're wearing, or a Flyers pennant in the background, or even any musical artist from Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, and
Right.
on and on. You'll see them wearing Flyer jerseys. Well, Ike Richmond is the guy who would do that and make sure that they wore that, and as a result, the iconic Flyers jersey, went not only over North America and the United States, it went worldwide. Because inevitably, like one of these rock stars, whether it's Madonna or Billy Joel, they would be filmed and it would be shown all across the world, and they have a Flyers jersey on. And it really helped popularize the team all over. And, I cover the team still now, and I go, wherever I go, there are thousands of Flyers fans in attendance, whether it's in Florida or California or Winnipeg. You just see a sea of orange. There's always a couple thousand Flyers jerseys there, and it's amazing to see. And I talked to Ed Snyder about that one day, and he was really proud of that logo, which is I think it was his wife and sister helped design. That logo is now famous all over the world. So he was really proud of that.
Sam, I think one of the things you could say about Ike Richmond, he comes from a rich, I don't mean financially rich, he obviously had money, but he comes from a family that was involved in professional sports, a great partner within the Philadelphia 76ers, and in fact, one of the most controversial stories in all of sports is Will Chamberlain and Ike's father. So he came from a good breeding ground.
Yeah, no question. I think his grandfather was the 76ers owner. And
That's right.
I don't know if you were doing the game then or not, but I remember that
he was the one that promised Will a section of the team, and then he died, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, and I remember when he had a heart attack. I was watching the game. Did Charlie Swift do the games back then? I for some reason I keep thinking Charlie Swift.
I think you're correct. Charlie did do them, and unfortunately for Charlie, he died a little bit too early. But
yeah, and I think he was doing the game when Ike Richmond had the heart attack, but back in the days of Wilt and Al Greer and Billy Graham, and go on and on.
One other thing, Sam, before I let Doug get right back in here, and that would be that you talk about stories off the ice like the logo and so forth. But I think one of the great stories, we talked to Bobby Taylor about it all the time because he goes back. Flyers can play a softball game and draw 5,000 people. I mean, it's unbelievable what the loyalty that the Flyers have, the loyal fans that the Flyers have that have continued all these years.
Yeah, and early in my career, I was working for a little weekly newspaper called the Record Breeze in Lindenwold, New Jersey, and I remember covering one of those games. And there were thousands of people there, like you said, and Jim Florio was a congressman. I remember he was playing in the game, but he wasn't the big draw. The draw was, the Flyers and some current Flyers at that time. This is probably the late 70s, current Flyers at that time, and some alumni members. And people were just wrapped all around the field. And, winning 2 Stanley Cups in this city, as you know, was so star for a champion, and that's what winning 2 Stanley Cups does. And, of course, 2 million people attended each parade in 74, 75, and unfortunately there has been another parade since, but they have improved, and they're working their way back toward that, hopefully.
Doug?
Just want to mention the book is published by our friends at Triumph Books. There's so many great sports-themed books, so you can get it there. The Big 50 Philadelphia Flyers. And Sam, I'll just kind of wrap up my portion. Just ask you, I know you have a chapter in the book. I've always been interested in the great PA announcers at different stadiums. Of course, the Madison Square Garden had a couple of the great ones. And you talk about Lou Nolan, right? He was a longtime PA announcer for the Flyers, right?
Yeah, Lou still is. He's the only. In fact, I wrote a book with Lou 2 years ago called "If These Walls Can Talk," and Lou is the only person still around who worked for the original Flyers in 1967, and he worked in the public relations department with Joe Cadillac back then.
I was going to say, how about Joe Cadillac and his wife, because they both worked there from almost day one.
Yeah. Well, Joe isn't there now, though. I mean, Lou is the only guy that still works for the Flyers that worked for them, from the inception. And in fact, we have a chapter on Joe Cadillac actually in this book too. And he is very instrumental, as is Lou, for building interest in the Flyers, because you'll remember when they started, they would be drawing 6,000, 7,000, and then 7 years later, the Stanley Cup champions. There's a waiting list for tickets, but Lou is still going strong. He's still their PA guy and does, all kinds of work for them on the side. He'll be, visiting hospitals or whatever they need, and,
right,
and doing a lot of charity work. And he is now one of the faces of the Flyers, no question. That booming voice and that distinctive style, and just a classy guy.
Well, we were very fortunate, and I said this the other night. It was in November when we had the Hall of Fame dinner, and I said Philadelphia was so lucky because, you look at the announcers, or you're going 20 and 30 years with the same people, whether, it was the PA announcer, whether it was the team announcers. I mean, we grew up with a group of people that stayed and stayed and stayed, and a lot of cities don't have something like that.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, people like you and Bill Campbell, and you go on and on. I mean, it was just a great time, and it's still like that. I mean, there's still guys that have been around now. Jim Jackson has been there 25 years, I think, and Steve Coates has been there maybe between TV and radio probably 35, 40 years.
Right.
Tim Saunders, and you go on and on. But it's a great area, and as you know, it's probably got the most passionate fans. Sometimes too passionate. I think they get too involved, but that's what you love about the Philly fans.
Well, Doug, my last question before we let Sam go, and Sam, I appreciate all the time you give us tonight, but we can't go too far without the magician. I mean, Freddie Shiro. He was unbelievable. I mean, he was a guy you never knew what he was thinking.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time. I mean, he's the guy who went to Russia to study the game and put some of their passing ideas into his practices. He's the guy that introduced a morning skate. Basically because he didn't want the players out drinking the night before, and he says, "Hey, if I get them on the ice at 10 in the morning,
did McLeish, did he honor that?"
I wasn't covering them then, but I guess, but I don't know if I'm 50-50, but he was the first guy to have an assistant coach, and he was ahead of his time. First guy to use video to study teams.
Right.
You go on and on. He was, ducked in the Hall of Fame about 5 years ago, and I thought it was way overdue. And won 2 Stanley Cups. Of course, took the Rangers to the Stanley Cup Finals, and as I said, just an innovator. But you didn't always know where you stood with him when I talked to players, because
absolutely nobody knew. And then he used to write on the board. Nobody could. You had to interpret what he was putting up on the board. They go and looked after the game was over to see what he said.
Except for what he wrote, of course, before the last game: "Win today and walk together forever." And that's That was their motto, and then they went out and beat Boston, and those guys won the cup, and those guys are still best of friends, and most of them live in this area still. And,
right. Well, I was very fortunate because, when Jimmy and Joe both, when Joe retired, Jimmy, he sat right next to him in the press box. I mean, he worked for the Flyers. I'm assuming he still does. And but he would always sit in the press box, and I sat right next to him. So I had a chance to sort of weed him and get some information from him. He's terrific. Both brothers were terrific, but I think Jimmy was a builder. He went into the building business and built houses, didn't he?
Well, he now owns a hockey rink in, I think it's Delaware County, and he runs all kinds of camps for kids and different hockey programs for kids. So he's involved with that. I'm not sure if he's still in building or not, but Joe Watt sells advertising for the Wells Fargo Center, for like the sideboards and that kind of thing. And had lunch with Joe a couple of weeks ago, and he just has story after story after story.
He entertained you the whole time you were there. What a great, both of them, great.
No question about it.
Doug, I'll let you wrap it all up. I tell you, it's great to talk about the great days of the Flyers and the whole organization. And the only time it sort of took a step back is when Ed decided to get in the movie business instead of staying with the hockey team and turned it over to his son, and things didn't work out so well for a while. But I'll let you close it out.
Okay, and again, we've been talking with Sam Carchidi. The name of the book is The Big 50, Philadelphia Flyers, the men and moments that made the Philadelphia Flyers. Again, you can go to triumphbooks.com to get the book. And, Sam, real pleasure talking to you. And in my next life, I'm coming back to live in Philadelphia. It seems like you guys had more fun there than maybe we did in New York.
I appreciate the time, Doug and Don. Great talking to you guys.
Thanks, Sam.
Good to see you. Take care. I'll see you when it's coming down with the Lightning are here.
Sounds good.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Sam Carchidi, Philadelphia Inquirer, and, of course, he's covered baseball and all sports. And, Don, I'm glad we had a chance to do this. I know the book came out, I guess, in November, but I'm glad we had a chance to talk a little Flyers hockey tonight. We haven't done a lot on the Flyers, the history of the Flyers on the show.
Well, I'll tell you, great guy and does a great job. And I'll tell you, one thing that the Flyers have had since they first started, to be honest with you, was great coverage with great reporters. So, and Sam's right there with them, and it was a lot of fun reading what they had to say and learning something along the way from them as we went along. But great talking to Sam, and wish him the very best of luck.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll just wrap up. Got a couple minutes left. Your quick thoughts on the game Sunday? I know you and I emailed a little bit, but we got a little audience here, so I'll let you go first.
Well, we did a show with Bill Birdie and Billy Warndell on Wednesday night last week, and my thought was that the offensive complement of both teams were equal. My thought was that the defensive complement of both teams were quite equal as well, and I also thought that the special teams were quite equal. But it seems to me at the critical time at the end of the game, I had picked Ray Rhodes Andy Reid to win the game. Mm-hmm. Because I felt that he had the superior quarterback. Now, you wouldn't have thought that through the first 2.5 quarters. I mean, Patrick didn't get off to a great start, but he certainly finished with a halo around them. And I also thought that the special teams turned out to be not equal. I thought that the 49ers made a number of mistakes, not just from a quarterback standpoint, but I think they made a number of mistakes trying to return those kickoffs that were down about the 2-yard line and 3-yard line, especially the last one. I think they got it out to the 17-yard line when they had a score. And, and I got to give Andy Reid a lot of credit because I guess it was his leadership that, most of the kickers now kick the ball in the end zone and it's all over. But Bill Belichick a couple of years ago started to kick the ball short and make them run it back.
Right.
And if you notice, 90%, I shouldn't say 90%, that's probably an exaggeration, but a great deal of the time, I'll put it that way, they don't get to the 25-yard line. So if you make them run it back, you got a much better chance of holding them inside the 25 than you do if you kick it in the end zone.
Yeah, I think the people in Philadelphia, we're talking Philadelphia Flyers hockey, I think they had to be rooting for the Chiefs for Andy. He'd been there, 14 years in Philly, and now another 7 in Kansas City. So good for him. I mean, great. I didn't realize he had as many wins. They said it was like 220 some odd wins he had in his career. I didn't know it was that high. I know he had a great career, but boy. Just to have that many regular season wins and now a Super Bowl. He's been in another one, of course, with Philadelphia. So I guess you know him quite well. You have to feel good for him, and you got to feel good for a guy like that. He's had a kind of a rough go with the sons and all that. I believe one of the sons now is one passed away, but another one is on his coaching staff. So that had to feel good.
Yeah, he struggled through with a number of things like that. You're exactly right, and you wish him nothing but the best of luck. He was terrific at Philadelphia, and if you look at the tree of coaches that he has supplied around the league that learned under his tutelage, you really had to root for him. He's a terrific guy, and as Sam Carchidi said just a minute ago, a great motivator. Sometimes you don't get to the Super Bowl, and of course that's what everybody said all these years. Well, he doesn't win the big game. He doesn't win the NFC Championship game. He doesn't go to the Super Bowl. He lost the game. But I mean, if you look at his record, I mean, he's the winningest coach in football right now. So,
yep.
He, as you pointed out, and I got to say, in the game, they spent a lot of time talking about what his personal record was and how many games he had won and where he stood. And I think pretty much everybody around, certainly those in Philly, were rooting for him to win the Super Bowl. And
I'd like to spend 1 minute. You and I emailed about this, too. I thought the announcing, thought Joe Buck and Troy did another great job. They didn't overdo it. They just kind of let the game unfold before you, and I thought I gave them a good rating of an A. I thought they did a great job.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other thing is that I think you have a great chance when you have a real good ball game like that, that you then become a better announcer than you are if you try to, if you have a turkey, and it's tough to keep up the momentum going.
Right.
And I think they had a great game to do. I thought both announcers did their job extremely well. And I agree with you. I thought they did a superb job.
Yeah, it wasn't overproduced. I mean, that's what we've seen with television the last 15, 20 years. Not too many graphics. They didn't do too much with the sideline reporters. I thought they did just the right tone.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not much on those, things that they drop in. But I guess after you do 6 hours before the game starts, I can't imagine Phil Mushnick had a piece on that the other day. Yes, maybe it was yesterday. You started at 6 o'clock in the morning. Who in the world, who in God's name could watch something like that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. But once the game started, I'm a bad judge because I don't watch any pregame shows. But I turned it on when the game started.
No.
But
I didn't watch the halftime either, so I won't comment on it other than what I've read about it. But from what they described, it sounded like it was kind of risque.
Well, the newspapers have really, especially some of the female. Well, the Post today had a great piece. I forget who it was that wrote it, and then there was another or two pieces. One by a female reporter, and
she liked it. I read that piece. She thought it was great. Yeah, the woman reporter liked it.
I think you got the wrong reporter. she was emphasized and re-emphasized that all the kids are watching it.
Oh, okay. I read some woman reporter's story that she thought it was great, but I didn't read that one then. Okay, well, good.
Not the one.
I agree with the one you're talking about, but yeah. But I didn't watch it, so I won't comment specifically. But from what I've read, I would agree with her.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that didn't just
inappropriate. I've heard a lot of that. Inappropriate for kids.
That's the best way to put it. That's the best way to put it. It was inappropriate. Too many youngsters watching, and
because that's a family gathering. The Super Bowl. Kids may not watch football all year, but they'll watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and J-Lo had her own daughter out there. 13
yeah, I didn't like
old,
that either. The picture I saw that.
So, I can't say that it was something that I thought was good.
No. But that's our thoughts on that. And again, we want to thank Sam Carchidi. Again, you can get the book at triumphbooks.com, The Big 50 Philadelphia Flyers, and we'll look forward to having him on maybe later in the year. I'm sure he'll be covering baseball, so we'll talk some of that. Maybe does he come down and do spring training down? Do you know? Does he cover them?
I don't know if he does or not. To be honest with you, if he does, I looked at the schedule. I think the Phillies are over here twice.
Yeah, we get the Phillies twice in Sarasota with the Orioles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I get him twice. So if he's down, I'll sure get a chance to talk to him, and maybe we'll have him on again.
Hopefully we'll get out there next about a week and a half, I believe. Pitchers and catchers report. So
isn't it? The 12th starts
pretty soon. Yeah. If the Orioles let us in another year, we'll be there.
We'll be there. You got it.
Thanks, Don. We'll talk to you again next time.
Let's go, you Philadelphia Flyers. Let's go, you orange and black. Show them we're doers, we're not dyers. We got that certain something that the others lack. Fight on, you ever-loving bullies. You know we've been behind you from the start. Everyone admires the Philadelphia Flyers. You're number one in everybody's heart. And so is cheer for Bernie Portant, Eddie Von Imp, Andre DuPont. Bobby Clark can move that puck. So can McLeish and Kindred Chuck. Crispin, the Watsons, they come to play. With Schultz and Bob Kelly leading the way. Tommy Blade and Slapshot score. The Flyers will win once more. Come on, Teddy Harris. Pass that puck across to Leach. An assist from Billy Barber. The goal will put us